Yes, apparently we could have made giant movable structures as early as beta 1.7. In this video I will go into early flying machine history, I will explain to you how this is working and will give you a beginner tutorial if you would like to design something on your own. I know that more and more people will reject modernity and out of nostalgia or other reasons decide to commit to old versions. So let's see how far we can actually push them in terms of technical development. I would also like to advertise a Discord server for Slimeless Flying Machine developers, so if you need help or if you have some interesting ideas, feel welcome to join and share them. You can also get some spoilers for my future projects in Work in Progress channel. Yeah. In April of 2011, Minecraft Java Edition Beta 1.5 was released, adding detector rails. Just 2 months later, Beta 1.7 released adding normal and sticky pistons. People immediately started doing piston worms. This is technically the very first prototype of a flying machine, although they require external power source. In November of 2011, Design Challenge free-floating self-powered flying machine forum on Minecraft forums was created. For the following 3 years, people would discuss and share ideas about a self-moving structure called the flying machine. This forum would play a huge role for flying machines, but for now, not much development happened. In January of 2013, we got a new Minecraft 1.5 snapshot that added redstone blocks. It is unclear who and when exactly invented infinitely expandable piston bridges. Earliest example I could find dates back to May of the same year, but people admit in the comments that they saw the structure before. This is the first time machine could move in places where player hasn't stepped yet. Less than a month later, a huge discovery was made on that Minecraft forum I mentioned earlier. User by the name Rentuka made the sideways and upwards extension to piston bridge. Sadly, this discovery flew under the radar for most technical Minecraft communities since it was posted only on Minecraft forums. Half a year later, Daniel Cotes would rediscover sideways and upwards extension, and together with Panda and Cabo would generate the very first spawner in survival. And this was kinda it for Slimeless Flying Machines. Only minor development happened in this field for the following years. Probably due to the fact that on April 2013, Panda and Cabo coded up slime blocks and they got added to Minecraft 1.8 snapshot. Here you can see the very first flying machine as we know them today. This video was posted before the snapshot became public even. People got really busy with slime-based flying machines, and only in the summer of 2021, MXI and Jan started working on Kobras again. That's when I started thinking, apparently during completeness, for flying machines are 3 blocks, normal and sticky pistons for piston worms and movable power source for activating them. And Beta 1.7 actually had all those 3 already, just instead of redstone blocks we have detector rails. Due to my limited knowledge of Beta, I only managed to make a basic piston bridge and a sideways extension that require force to operate. Meanwhile, MXI and Jan were busy working on instant sideways extension that they published on the 8th of September 2021. Immediately after that, Myron also joined, and together with MXI, they started developing a full-cycle engine based on the idea from sideways extension. And just 2 months later, they published this. This is probably the most insane cutting-edge Minecraft build to ever be done. I was spectating development of this engine, and up to the very moment it was made, nobody even was certain if it's possible or not. This quote from MXI sums it all. 3 years later, a couple of people independently realized one thing: Block 56 does not create updates in Beta 1.7. Those people were Deadly Dirtblock, MXI and Jan. They managed to make an infinitely expandable piston bridge in Beta that also floats. Sometime later, I joined this development, and as someone who has experience with both Kobras and using cards on flying machines, I managed to make sideways, upwards and downwards extensions. And this is where we are today. I still have very limiting knowledge of Beta, so big thanks to Archeron, MXI and Deadly for explaining mechanics to me, giving tips and ideas all the way of me developing this dungeon generating Cobra. This would not be possible without them, so please check their workout. I shown that MXI have a lot of public videos, but as for Deadly, you'll have to visit this unlisted videos playlist to enjoy better content. Also, John is planning on making a video about Beta 1.7 piston mechanics. I know that everyone watching this has one question in mind, so are full cycle engines possible in Beta 1.7? Well, the answer is I don't know. Just like with 1.5 engine, I don't think we will have an answer until someone makes a working design. But I try making a layout and it seems kinda doable, although way harder than Minecraft 1.51. So if you wanna spectate development, join Slimely Stage Hub Discord. Now the fun part begins. I will walk you through the basics of Beta 1.7 Kobras, so you can start designing your own right today. As you can see, I'm actually in Beta 1.8 because it has creative mode, but everything I will show you will also work in Beta 1.7. Actually, Deadly recommended to me Beta 1.7.3 because it's a more stable release and you don't get random crashes from just pistons firing as in Beta 1.7. So let's start with blocks that are the main core parts of our Kobras, and that's obviously pistons for piston worms and movable power source, detector rail, and obviously you need to trigger the detector rail. You can use any card you want. It's actually really annoying in Beta 1.8 creative mode that you can enter minecart even through blocks and from far distances. So yeah, you can, for example, use furnace minecart. Next we have blocks that create updates, so obviously that's pistons, detector rail, but it only causes updates when it gets powered or depowered, not when you move it. And also a pretty useful one is the golden rail, because it creates an update diagonally. Let me demonstrate it to you. Let's bud this piston and let's power this rail. So yeah. Next one is also an interesting one. It's a sponge. Technically it's not obtainable in survival, so I would not recommend using it, but in some edge cases I guess you can use it because it creates updates in a 7x7 cube with edges taken out. You can obtain it with one weird developer version that has some debug chests, but yeah, let's not talk about that. And also the last one is trapdoor. It causes an update when you open or close it, but sadly it's only for manual use, so you can, for example, make an incremental engine if you make an engine, because when you power it with some power source and you move that power source away, it actually stays activated forever. And like even if you update it, it will not close by itself. So yes, that's a bummer. Next we have sunlight transparent blocks. So unlike modern versions, your block palette is not very big. Yeah, I forgot to mention that trapdoors need support blocks, else they will pop off. So we have glass and we have pistons. Sadly, no block that supports rail, so we can't make sunlight transparent engines. Yeah, and another block that I have on the side is ice. So those blocks have opacity of 0, so they let 100% of the light through. Solid blocks have opacity of 255, so they don't let any light through. And ice has an opacity of 1, so it lets most of the sunlight through, but it's not really daylight transparent, but still maybe better than normal blocks, although I'm not sure about that. Probably not, but you can use ice and glass to highlight different phases. So next we have blocks without collision. That's basically an opened fence gate, although we don't have fence gates in Beta 1.7. Well, we have them in 1.8. So yes, that's what I mean. It's useful because we are working with minecarts and sometimes you just don't want to move a minecart, but you want to move blocks around it. Instead of that, you can use data value 4 or more, so-called invisible stair. That's something Deadly showed to me. So here's the setup, how to do it, and it will basically act like a normal block, normal stair, but that has no collision and also no texture. Next we have some more blocks with interesting collisions. So most blocks have a collision of 1 by 1 by 1 block, and here are movable blocks that have some special collisions, and that will come in handy when working with minecarts. So once again trapdoor, then we have slabs, stairs, soul sand. Farmland actually doesn't work. It's although looks like less than a block, it's still a block. However, soul sand does work, and I actually use it in some of my extensions, and I'll show it to you later. And obviously we have fence, but unique thing about old fences is that they're actually meter by meter wide and 1.5 tall. So yeah, also helpful. I use it in one of my extensions. So next we have gravity affected blocks. I didn't use it yet, but in theory you can use something like MXI did for delay circuit. So yeah, those are really useful, 2 blocks. And the last thing is blocks to highlight phase numbers. That's very useful for debugging your Kobras. So we have different colors for the wool, and it's actually the only block that has different colors in beta. That's something we use stained glass in modern versions for. So what you do is first phase that will move will use white, then you just increment block IDs. So the phase that moves the second will be orange, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's something I recommend doing, so you can distinguish phases visually really easily on a glance. Now another thing I forgot to mention is I told that Pistons update, send updates, and let's test it out. Seems like it didn't cause an update. Well, that's a very interesting thing about beta piston mechanics, is that pistons don't really like to update pistons of the same type. So if we replace this piston with sticky piston, it will update, and we can build it other way around, it will also update. So yes, it's a really important part, and this is very hard to work with, but you have to keep it in mind. You need to use opposing piston types to update other pistons. For example, even when you're doing something with a sponge, if you push the sponge with normal piston, it will only update sticky pistons. And if you push the sponge with sticky piston, it will only update normal pistons. But if you pull sponge, it will actually update all pistons. So as you noticed that before, the extension actually causes an update even to the same types. So yeah, keep that in mind. Crucial thing you have to understand about Kobras is that they don't move at the same time. They actually have multiple phases. So in phase number 1 you power half of the pistons, and obviously you can't move that powered half of the pistons. So you move the other half, depowered pistons. And in phase number 2 you move pistons that were powered in the phase 1 but now depowered. So at any time, roughly half of the pistons in your flying machine are powered like those, and half of them are depowered like those. So yeah, if you look at this, we can actually move phase number 1, the white one, and once it moves, it will become powered, but at the same time it will steal power sources from the second phase, and the second phase will become depowered. So let's look at it in action. So yeah, now as you can see, the first phase became powered, and the second one is depowered, and it's ready to be moved. and now first phase is reset again. Now let's try to add a simple sideways extension. So core part of any extension is a piston worm. You're familiar with it. So let's look at piston sequence that we need to perform for it to move one block forward. So first we need to power the back piston, then we need to depower it. Now we need to power the sticky piston, and we need to depower it. And now it moved one block. So now I would recommend you, if you're not familiar with Kobras, to actually pause this video and try to perform this action at the end of the infinitely expandable piston bridge, because if you will understand this mechanic, I think Kobras will suddenly click for you and you will understand how everything works in the universe. So yeah, pause now. And now the solution, I rebuilt it so it's closer to the starting station. But all you need to do is to actually replace normal piston with a sticky piston and place a power source in front of him. So now let's place pistons like that. So now let's analyze this. So when we move the orange phase, this piston will deactivate, moving power source into this position. Once the power source starts moving, this sticky piston will start deactivating, and it will move normal piston into this position. And this position will already be powered from here, and normal piston will push the sticky piston forward. So yeah, we just performed this piston action. So let's see it in action. Yeah, it moved one block forward, and in the next phase it will reset to the default position. So yeah, now once again the sticky piston is powered and the normal piston is getting pulled. Two things to note here. If you paid attention, this part actually moved at the same phase as this orange part. So this is the orange phase. And the second thing to note is that you probably saw a weird thing happening here, because we actually pull the rail from under the minecart and it still triggers this normal piston once it's here and has no minecart on top of it. This is because some blocks, some redstone components in beta actually get affected by random ticks, and as you see in this list, detector rail is actually one of them. So once we pull detector rail from under the minecart, it actually stays activated until random tick hits it. And even if it hits the very next tick, the normal piston still had time to be activated. So that's all working out, thankfully. Now, how do we continue adding extensions to the site? Well, as you can see, this is orange and this is white, meaning that we can just continue the white phase forward. And now this is just same thing as we have here. So let's put the power source here, and let's put a sticky piston here, and let's move it forward. It gets activated, so this is the same thing as here, but in a different phase. And now the orange phase will deactivate the sticky piston. So yeah, that's how you add normal extensions to the site. We can just continue the same sequence, but invert the phase. Yeah, still works. Yeah, one thing to note about directionality of minecarts and rails. Obviously that's something to keep in mind. I didn't really experiment with it, but minecarts are longer on this axis than they're wide on this axis, so maybe Kobras going in that direction are more reliable, but I didn't experiment with it enough to make any conclusions. So yeah, let's quickly. Oops. Let's look at it flying before it got too dark. Yep, and now white should move forward. Yep, as you can see, everything works. So we covered sideways extension that inverts phase, and now let me show you a sideways extension that actually moves in the same phase. So here we have white phase, and let's make another extension here that will also move in white phase. That will come in handy later. So we just need to let's first place this one. Yeah, so instead of placing those pistons here, we now have them forward, and it's still the same piston action as there, but now it moves in sync with this one. So let's see it in action. Yeah, nothing moved there, and now with the white phase it will move. One thing to note is that you can still add extensions, thankfully, because this moves forward with a slight delay from this one. So although they're same phase, you can still do the same magic as their different phases, although they're not. Now let's finally look at Kobras that don't need floor to operate. So the core bug that we rely on here is the fact that block 56 does not create updates. So when we move floor under this rail, it actually doesn't realize that it is floating, and when blocks arrive they send an update, and rail checks and sees that it has floor under it, and it just works out. Let's see it in action. So yeah, no problem. Now top one, and this is how we move rails. One thing to note is that if you update this rail somehow while the floor is moving under it, it will pop off, sadly, but that's easy to work around sometimes. Sometimes not easy. So now let's look at infinitely expandable piston bridge in beta 1.7. Here I use same principle as there, but instead of pushing bottom piston, then waiting some time and pushing the top one, I actually do it in the same game tick, although I use the fact that torches get processed before repeaters. So bottom starts moving in the same tick, but before the top part. Let's see it in action. Exactly same principle as there, but with 2x2 instead of 1x2. Now let's trigger this side. One thing to note before I show you extensions is that minecars fall through block 56. So let me demonstrate it. This one is on a rail and this one without rail. So yeah, the one without rail just falls through the floor, and the one on the rail thankfully stays. There are two solutions to that. One solution is to position the minecart between two blocks. Oops. Like here. Just make sure that those blocks are different phases, so floor doesn't move from under the minecart at the same time. So yeah, that's solution number one that will come in handy later. And solution number two is actually just using lazy processing chunks. As you may know, entities don't get processed the same way they're processed in entity processing chunks. Minecarts would not get affected by gravity. They will just get pushed forward by the pistons and behave really well. And that was really helpful on a Kobra that I showed at the start. Additionally, we don't actually give a fuck about the minecarts there, because even if they get left behind or glitch into blocks or whatever, detect rails will stay activated because they're outside of random tick range. I think random tick range is 19 by 19 chunks centered around the player in beta 1.7. So yeah, as long as you move outside of that range, we don't need to care about minecarts. We just need to place them at the start, so all rails are powered, and then we can just continue moving without the minecarts. And rails will behave almost like a redstone block. Yeah, let me show you an extension now, finally. This is the same thing as over there. Nothing special so far. Well, Soul Sand is special, but I'll show you why it's needed a bit later. Oops. Now, let's offset this minecart but by half a block, so it's between different phases and doesn't fall through floor. To do it is, you can just use trapdoor. Now it still activates this detect rail, but it's also offset. Now, why I need this soul sand? Well, minecarts are really glitchy and they can get inside of this block while moving, and after they got partially inside of this block, they will just continue moving forward until they push this minecart off or just fall through or whatever. So I found a fix, and that's to use soul sand. This way it doesn't actually get pushed into this block. You maybe even noticed while I was working on those extensions with the floor that sometimes minecarts would glitch into blocks, and I was fixing it while not recording. But yeah, here is a fix for that. Now let's add an extension, and this will be an extension that moves in the same phase as where it's starting from. So this is orange one actually. So this is the same extension as I showed over there, just too high. Let's demonstrate it. Yeah, nothing fell through. Now let's move it forward. Why I am doing an extension that moves in the same phase and not one that inverts the phase like those two? Well, you can do it, but sadly, let me demonstrate it real quick. But sadly this piston will not update and I didn't find a way to update it. Yep, as you saw, it didn't update and this piston didn't move. One way to solve it is using sponges. Other way is to just somehow try adding an extension down below and somehow updating it with a piston like that, but I didn't find a way to do it. So yeah, sadly only extensions that move on the same phase for now. This extension is really easy to tile. Nothing will move because it was white phase, and everything will move in the orange phase. This is a design for entity processing chunks. However, if you're building, for example, a Kobra or Bedrock breaker or something that can operate in lazy processing chunks, I would recommend, instead of offsetting this minecart, just not worrying about it, just doing that. So yeah, that simplifies it a lot. This minecart will not fall through the floor in lazy processing chunks, so this is working perfectly fine. Now I will demonstrate to you an upwards extension that also moves on the same phase. I did make an upwards extension that shifts the phase, you can find it in the Slimelets Tech Hub Discord. Although it's too wide, so it wasn't really useful. So yeah, let's go. I mean, it's really similar to this one. It's actually exactly the same one, although with one caveat. Oops. So this block, if we are making this for the lazy chunks, we can leave it as anything. But if we want to use it in entity processing chunks, we need a block without collision in here. So it can be data value 4 or more stair, as I explained earlier. But just for testing purposes, I will use fence gate. Once again, this is only 1.8 plus block. It does not exist in beta 1.7. But yeah. So that's basically it for the upwards extension. Actually, I would also like to add another block here. It's not like actually needed, but I found it helpful. Let's move it forward. Nothing will move right now because white face, and now everything should move forward. Yeah, here's why we needed a block without collision in here, because without it minecart would get stuck on a slope trail and it would actually be so high that it doesn't activate the slope rail. Yeah, now let's talk about the upward part of this extension. So this is working, and it also one wide, so it can fork to the sides. This will sadly not work because this minecart will get inside of this block, and I can't use the same trick with soul sand here, sadly, because this minecart gets pushed by this minecart, and after some time it will glitch more and more into this block until one moment it will push this minecart out of its way and rails will depower. So this will work in lazy processing chunks, but if you want to build it in entity processing chunks, we need to modify it a bit. So yeah, it's a bit of a hacky solution. This is not really reliable. What I found out is that when you go just one block up, this extension is pretty reliable and seems to work at least almost all the time. But when you start chaining those extensions one after another, they stop being reliable. So yeah, if you want to use it in entity processing chunks, pay a lot of attention to this part. Let's move it forward. Yeah, it worked, and it should work at least in theory, but it may break. It's not really reliable. However, in lazy processing chunks, this is a really reliable upwards extension, and I used it on a Kobra and it worked perfectly. So yeah, that's something to later improve. Now let's build downwards extension. Sadly, it's too wide, so I had problems with managing it to fit at the same node as an upwards extension, so we then don't have yet a fork that goes up and down from the same extension, but once that's done, we will be able to compact Kobra by a lot. So enough mumbling, let's build it. So here we have same extension I showed you multiple times already, moves on the same phase. But now it has a little twist. Oops. So we need to power the piston from the white phase. So let's actually use soul sand here. And it should be powered right now. And we actually need blocks here. Let's use, once again, fence gates. I will kill myself. For fuck's sake. Right. This should now work. Let's add a piston with a rail. So, why such complicated setup? Well, the reason is that this thing moves forward and the top part actually updates first. So if we just have a rail like that, it will pop. So we need to add a small delay, and a good way to add delay is actually to feed this thing for future extensions. Yeah, and there is no way to really power the thing without this hacky solution, but at least this works. Fuck. Let's see it in action. Oops, forgot one minecart. And yeah, this is only for lazy processing chunks, so I didn't really have to do those stuff here. I could have made just that. Next thing I want to show you is how to add delay within a phase. So let's say that we want to delay bottom part from the top part, and all you need to do is to actually just place pistons. So I think this should be enough. Let's see it in action now. Now the tutorial part is over. Let me just show you some random stuff I made over the course of the past 2 weeks. So first thing is this two-way infinitely expandable piston bridge. This is a design by MXI and Jan, slightly adopted to beta 1.7. So let's see it in action. Yeah, don't know where this can be used. I had some stupid ideas obviously, but nothing really useful. But I have a feeling that this is useful. Next I have an upwards extension that shifts phases, however it's too wide, so I didn't find it useful in Kobras or Bedrock breakers that I will show you. Still a pretty good one. Sadly not enough push there. Sadly not enough push limit over here to add Bedrock breaking modules too. It's like at 11 in some places. So first phase is the blue one, and the second phase is white one, and as you can see it goes in a spiral. So yeah, they alternate back and forth. Let's trigger it. Now white one. Now onto the Bedrock breaker. This layout was originally discovered by John and later modified by Deadly Dirt Block. So idea is that you bar a piston and then you move that piston. And as you remember, when blocks start moving, they don't actually create light update, block updates. However, an interesting way to get an update is to add a block that breaks from movement, like melon or leaves or water actually. And that way you get an update once it starts moving, and you'll get this. So yeah, it's a pretty easy setup to move. However, Kobras and Beta are not that easy, so I didn't manage to make a really good design. Here's one that's tileable. However, you need leaves over here. I wanted to use water originally, that's an idea by Deadly, but sadly the way these extensions upwards and sideways move, they move in a single phase, and when you move in a single phase, most of the time this piston stays powered, same as this one and same as all of them basically. So once you bud this, if any update happens, it breaks, it will no longer move forward. And with water you will get an update once water flows from the side and fills this air gap that piston creates after it deletes Bedrock. So basically there is not enough delay before we bud the piston again, and yeah, it doesn't work with water sadly. To fix that, I was developing an extension that moves in multiple phases. So in phase number 1 we bud the piston, then we in phase number 2 can move it again, but before budding it again we just need to wait some time for the water to finish filling all the air gaps. And yes, the idea is that we just dig 2 trenches on the sides and we fill them with water sources, and water will create new water sources along the path of Bedrock breaker, even if in those places, as long as we have a straight line through the layer, water should be able to fill everything with water sources. So yes, it's a good idea by Deadly, but sadly no execution so far. Now let's finally talk about star of this video, dungeon generating flying machine, also known as Kobra, because it looks like a Kobra. So here I compiled a bunch of Kobras. I'm in 1.12 by the way now. So here's the very first Kobra by Dan. As you can see, they didn't have downwards extension, so they had to go sideways from one arm and upwards from the other one, so it's really big. And that's what I also had in beta 1.7. So I didn't manage to make downwards extension that also forks upwards, so I just ended up not using it. So here is the Kobra I made. As you can see, compared to it, even dense Kobra looks really small. But hey, it's working. So let me show it closer. So first I have an upwards extension that allows me to instantly fork to the sides, and after that fork, one arm goes and creates the bottom part, and the upper arm creates the roof of the spawner. Now let's show the dungeon cage itself. So one thing I found out is that it doesn't actually need solid blocks like other Kobra designs use. So you actually can just use glass and everything works. I guess it checks that it's not air in the code. So yeah, glass is nice because sunlight transparency. This Kobra is way less laggy to move forward. You get like only light updates from those wood blocks, planks. One of the most valuable blocks in beta is mossy cobblestone, because only way to get it is through dungeon generation. And here I sadly only have half of the floor from under the main cage. I will link a playlist where you can find a lot of videos about spawner generation in Minecraft, so I will not be explaining it myself, but basically you need a floor under the actual floor for mossy to generate. And here I only managed to make half of the floor. Technically I could have added just one more set of pistons over here, but sadly this block moves forward and it butts this piston, and this part gets stuck. So to have a full floor I need to use a downwards extension, and as I already explained, I didn't really manage to make a good downwards extension. So yeah, this Kobra will get renovated sometime later. Once we figure out how to make a good downwards extension, this hopefully will get compacted by a lot, and we'll also have a full mossy floor. Let's now look at other Kobras. So here's the second Kobra that's by ground, and he managed to compact it using downwards extensions that he invented. So yeah, as you can see, downwards extensions instantly compacted the Kobra by a factor of 2. In fact, you can go further. So here is a design by MCJE. He didn't use any new extensions, he just placed blocks in different order, I guess, and it became, as you can see, a bit, actually a lot more compact than ground's one. So MCJE made this Kobra in 2021, and I also made a Kobra in 2021, and as you can see, it's even shorter. One of the cool parts about it is that I realized that you don't need solid blocks in dungeon blocks themselves. You can actually use, as I already showed, glass, or you can even use pistons and piston heads. So this is part of the roof of the spawner, and it works perfectly fine. This is the most compact Kobra so far for Minecraft 1.5 and beyond, until 1.8. I tried compacting it even more already this year, and I didn't manage to do it. So here is one of the attempts. As you can see, it's exactly the same length. However, it's probably way more blocks to place. So yeah, I added an extra test setup for you if you want to download this word, and if you want to try to compact this design even further. That's an interesting challenge. As you can see, also looks cool to see progress over the years. Well, except that that one is the newest Kobra. Yeah, next thing I want to talk about is peak spawners. So the setup by Myron that he showed for Minecraft 1.8 actually works in 1.5, and probably also works in beta, although in beta you need some extra fuckery that I will not talk about today because it's one of our future projects. But for Minecraft 1.5, setup is not much different from the Myron's setup. It's exactly the same. So idea is that you need to push the spawner block with the same set of blocks that generate the spawner. So here is the setup I made. This arm will move into the third chunk over here. Here is the second chunk. Here will be the first chunk, and the fourth chunk will be over here, and it will generate from this piston arm, and this will trigger the population of the normal spawner, and hopefully we will be able to push it forward and generate a peak spawner. Here I also made a version with just full glass. Looks a bit nicer, as you can see. And also this design of Kobra only supports 50% of the mossy floor. So for example, if you need some exact type of the spawner and you need to reroll random number generator a lot of times, and only half of mossy floor is not enough, so maybe you need to build a different design, like the one by MXI, for example. I'm in Minecraft 1.5.1 now, and let's try to generate a peak spawner with the setup I showed you earlier. So first I need to move this face, and now something interesting will happen. Yeah, game crashed. It's not responding currently. I will relaunch and be back. I'm back. Let's see if we manage to get a peak spawner. Let's fly forward. Yeah, don't mind missing chunks. That's just from me pasting this Kobra into the world, and those chunks were not generated yet. And here is something interesting. As you can see, dungeon actually generated. However, we don't have any spawner in here, and it's not like it's invisible. There's nothing here. Also, nothing in the chest. So what happened is actually not really clear to me. MXI checked my crash report, and his conclusion was that I somehow update suppress the world, and I trigger update suppression with this piston arm. So it actually happens exactly when the spawner tries to generate, and I prevent the spawner from generating and from loot being generated. So game basically stops only at the cobble and the chest that is also empty. I don't know why exactly this happens. MXI told me that he also tried generating a peak spawner in 1.5. However, his setup was a lot more similar to Myron's. So Myron was actually on a border of 4 chunks like that. All 4 cobble blocks are in different chunks. So this glass block was loading multiple chunks at the same time. However, here I was trying to make a more generalized setup, so I first load 3 chunks using this arm, and only the last one with this arm. So if you can you? Yeah, you can see numbers that show chunk borders. So here are 4 chunks. I don't know why this is happening, so if you have an answer, I will leave a link to the world download, so you can try it yourself and try to debug it. That's definitely an interesting case, and maybe we can even learn something from it. But I guess, as for now, I made first ever cobble and empty chest generator. Sorry for mumbling for so long. You're now free to do whatever you want. I will leave a world downloads to everything I showed in this video in the description, obviously, so you can play around with different extensions and Kobras and stuff and experiment yourself. Also, don't forget to join the Slimeless Stage Discord, because a lot of development will be happening there in the near future. And don't forget to check out all the people I mentioned in this video, because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. But for now, that's it. Bye.